In a lush valley in far northern New South Wales, just under the Queensland border, a little piece of Italy comes to life every winter. Descendants of Pietro Sinotti and Angela Battistuzzi, who escaped extreme poverty in northern Italy more than 140 years ago, gather to celebrate their Italian heritage and make salami.
Good job.
Of the 6 generations of Sinotti and Battistuzzi families, 4 are here today, headed by the Don of the family, Kevin Sinotti, and Nonna Elizabeth.
Yeah, a bit of the old tradition still hangs on. You can see how much notice they don't take.
It starts when the essential ingredient arrives in a refrigerated van.
I can open it up and hand the responsibility on to my children.
These days they buy a pig from the abattoir. But it wasn't always that simple.
Years ago we used to grow the pig here. And we come out and out there's a killing bay and hang him up and just put the bullet in him and then go from there.
Dave Ward heads the salami making operation. Married to Kevin Sinotti's daughter, he's done nearly a 40-year apprenticeship.
My father-in-law, he'd do it with about 4 or 5 other blokes and they'd start Saturday, they'd kill the pig and what have you, and they'd have a bit of a drink Saturday night and then they'd come back Sunday, but it was all sort of 5 blokes doing the whole lot, so you'd be at daylight, you'd be there till bloody 2 o'clock if you had a big pig.
It's still a 2-day process. Day 1, cut the skin off the carcass.
The middle spot.
The middle spot.
And cut the meat into strips.
It's going in a mincer, so it doesn't have to look pretty at this stage.
It's no small job, and it's all hands on deck. There are no tears, but there can be blood.
Won't be long before he's bleeding.
I can show you my glove and my band-aid. But I'd really rather not cut myself again.
For the annual salami making, some 30 family members, partners and friends are pitching in.
My partner's Andy. And I like to be involved. It's really fun and it's something different.
Enjoy it?
Plus I really enjoy eating the salami, so...
How hard is it to do, Peter?
Yes, it's pretty hard, especially when you're an amateur and you only do it once a year. We watched a butcher do it one year. He just made us look silly. This is all the good fat under the skin. We need this. If there's too much meat in the salami, it's just no good.
So you need a fair amount of fat?
Yeah. It just dries out otherwise, and fat's flavour. Kevin will be happy. Oh well, as happy as he can be. He's very hard to please.
The fat in the overall process is the important bit. Otherwise she's just too dry, and the fat also absorbs the herbs, spices, wine, salt, as well as the meat does.
But this is more than about making salami for the families for the next year. It's all about keeping the traditions alive and keeping the family history alive from one generation to the next.
This is a great family gathering. The sausages is a bonus, but getting together and friends and meeting, and it's all just, it's great stuff.
All about the family.
It's all about family. Might mean much to others, but it's just a great, all my grandchildren are here, and not all, but I'll meet them. It's great. I don't know why.
And all the cousins and...
Yeah. And friends. And, yeah. It's a good day.
You can see where it's come from through the Italian tradition. It's really all about the family. That's what it comes down to. Yeah.
And doesn't cost any.
The Italian heritage they celebrate today began here, New Italy, near Woodburn in northern New South Wales. Refugees from the northern Italy province of Veneto founded a community in the early 1880s. 48 families, desperate to escape crippling drought, politics and war, paid French conman Marquis de Reyes for passage to what they were led to believe would be paradise, an Italian community set up on an island off Papua New Guinea. It was a disastrous expedition. 340 set out, almost 100 died on the 3-month voyage. For the survivors, their suffering was far from over. There was no island paradise, no community waiting to welcome them, just jungle on impenetrable, unsuitable land.
No, it was a little bit of a sham actually. He took their money and promised them a land of milk and honey, and it wasn't. It was, they landed in a place, well, New Ireland, off New Guinea, and it was basically jungle to the sea and headhunters and malaria, and they struggled there for about 4 months.
All that they were left with was the boat that by now was unseaworthy. They made their way to Noumea, where survivors were rescued by Australian authorities. New South Wales Premier Sir Henry Parkes ordered a ship to pick them up, 217 of the original 340, and brought to Sydney. A year later, members of the expedition and other families settled here, 3,000 acres of scrub, virgin bushland with poor soil.
What they wanted to all live together. They wanted to form a community on their own, and they thought that soil here looked like the fertile soil that they were used to back in Italy. But unfortunately, it wasn't that fertile, and they struggled on the land here. But they made a living. They did make a living from it. It was basically bush, and they cleared it. There was a lot of logging to clear the land. A lot of hard work went into it. They did make a living, but I think the children realised that the land wasn't the best, and they sort of moved on, got married and moved away, and in the end the community slowly died.
But today it lives on. 100 years after the first settlers arrived, passionately committed descendants raised money to purchase 17 acres of the original New Italy site, to build a permanent memorial, a celebration of the struggles and life of their ancestors.
This site holds the stories of how those people, what their lives were like before they left, and what the experience of the actual journey was, and how they actually, after an incredibly sort of like tragic journey, managed to pull their lives back together again, were separated, and then came together at New Italy, at the New Italy sort of community site.
Currently we have listed descendants, and that's someone who can trace a bloodline back to one of these settlers, is in the order of 11,700.
New Italy's archivist Lester Cook, himself a descendant of the original settlers, tracks and records the ever-expanding list of descendants.
When I do the genealogy records, I include all the people who were on the expedition, in deference to the fact that they had all that suffering together. So to me it seemed a little bit rude to separate them just because they didn't come to New Italy.
He has created what is known as the New Italy spaghetti family tree, a bizarre, complicated interconnection of descendants and relatives.
You going first or me?
You go first, you're the older cousin.
Oh, thanks. I really needed a reminder of that one.
Donna Weston and her cousin Chris Rowlands are fourth-generation descendants of Pietro and Angela Sinotti, a young couple who settled and married at New Italy.
The family from the Marquis de Reyes expedition was the Battistuzis, and that was our first connection. And then they, through the line, we went to the Nicolais, and then the Sinottis, and then to current day, basically.
We grew up in Lismore, which had quite a lot of the people from New Italy.
A lot of the descendants from New Italy were there, weren't they? Because they gravitated to that area a lot.
But the Battistuzis, a lot of them went to casino
area.
But we have a similar look. Like we've all got this similar
The rounder face, which is lovely.
and it's kind of, you know, like, sorry cousins if you ever see this, but you know, like the more stocky body, that's us. So we've all got
Short and close to the pavement.
Yes, that's definitely us. So
that's what my father used to say anyway.
With the meat cut up, it's time to sit back, relax, and enjoy the traditional Italian hospitality. Not too hard or too long, because it's a 6 o'clock start next morning. Well, 6-ish. Now the serious work begins, mincing and seasoning the meat. This is make or break time. 14.75. The meat is carefully weighed so that it's just the right amount of seasoning goes in. Salt, pepper and garlic infused wine.
You know, some people put other spices in them. We're going to try a bit of cinnamon and apple in a little thin sausage this year. Something a bit different. How it turns out, it might be a 1 year thing and forget about it, but
it's a time-honoured process and it has to be done just right.
When it's leveled out, you sprinkle the salt on top, you'll see it happening, and then the pepper, and then the garlic that's crushed up in wine, and it goes over the top to dissolve into it.
Is to put a bunch of holes in it so that the spices and herbs and good stuff can penetrate the meat and marinate.
Assume the positions. Sarah, I'll watch that. Think you coming? Are you sure? Yeah.
Righto, now you can get to the good part that I don't want to do. No. You better go with your slide rather than your fingers, because if you pick up a splinter, it's up underneath your nails.
Which job are you going to do?
It's just like playing with Play-Doh. So you just push it down, push it down, push it down.
And then comes the good stuff. Wine infused with garlic.
You don't put the garlic in, we just put the wine.
Right.
The garlic stays out.
Yeah.
Otherwise, I don't know what it'll be like if you put the whole garlic in. I never tried it.
That would be like a moment of, like the old salamis when we get the old peppers and we go, oh my God, it's so hot. You'd be like, oh my God, garlic.
It's a process that takes hours, and it's not until the spices are mixed in and the fat squashed and broken up that the meat can be balled up and put into the compressor to make the salami. But this is more than about making salami for the families for the next year. It's all about keeping the traditions alive and keeping the family history alive from one generation to the next.
I think our role as we get older is to continue retelling the story. That's a really important part for us now. Until you start to know the story and own the story, the connection's not there. Like the nephews and nieces, you know, they've been roped into help as cousins are, and they have some sort of connection. But I think if you keep telling the stories to the young ones, you know, like we tell the same jokes every year about salami making, and you can imagine what those jokes are. And every year we tell them. This year we didn't tell them because we had a bunch of new people in there, and I wasn't so confident about what we could say. But those stories, and like retelling the stories about Uncle Dom and Auntie Polly, so they're still alive, and the stories of New Italy are the stories that we have to keep telling, because
otherwise they do get lost.
Yeah, and these kids come from that really an amazing resilience of people.
But there is one tradition remaining before the families head off for another year. The Don, Kevin Sonotti, has to give his judgment on this year's salami.
This is a very traditional part of the salami day, the costa, where all the ribs are cooked on the barbecue. We have that for morning tea. and part of it's quality control, where the rissoles are part of the mixture, and the Dom will check them and make sure he's happy with the salt content, the pepper content, the garlic, and then he'll give us the go-ahead and say if they're okay, or if they're not, we'll add more pepper or salt, whatever's needed. What do you think?
What do I think? Oh, that like in a mouthful, I'll tell you.
Usually, so the family says, he's never completely happy.
I hope the others don't like it.
Tastes damn good to me.
For once they got it right.
They got it right.
They got it right.
That's it for another year, but next year the families will gather to do it all over again, as it's been done through 6 generations over more than 140 years, and hopefully many more generations to come.
I feel a strong connection to the Italian story. I feel very Australian. There are certain things that you do that bring the family together because of the Italian traditional.
As the Italianness of New Italy is kind of dispersed into the hinterland and everything, and this intermarriage has happened and all of that sort of stuff, you tend to find that there's been a sort of like the way the rest of Australia is going, you know, this multicultural melange of, you know, cultures, which is, and the sum is Australian, you know. So in many ways there's a lot of Australianness here as well as New Italy, or Italianness, I think.
For myself and for my family, we really didn't know much about this story. It wasn't told much, and I find that interesting because there are also a lot of other people that I come across didn't know the story as they grew up, but became aware of it later and were fascinated by it.
Yes, everybody loves Italian. Oh, they've got style and class and design, and you know they're good. Their food's great.
I'm not ready for this.
Is that what you were thinking?
Yeah, it was very unbelievable. Yeah.
I don't know where my ass is.